Good morning, everyone. Yes, this is Deborah Jarrell's wife, if you didn't hear him. He's proud. Oh, good morning, guys. This morning I was reading out of Psalm 66:16. It said, "Come and hear, all who fear God, and I will tell you what he has done for my soul." And I love that invitation. It's not come and hear what I've accomplished. It's come and hear what God has done. And so throughout Scripture, God continually calls his people to remember. Remember what he's done. Remember his faithfulness. Remember where he's met you. He had Israel build memorials so future generations would remember his faithfulness. Jesus even gave us communion and said, "Do this in remembrance of me." Not because he forgets, but because we do. One of the ways the church has practiced remembrance for generations is by telling stories. Stories of God's faithfulness, stories of God's grace, and stories of his kindness in every season of life. And that's really the heart behind Faces of Fixate. This isn't about putting people on stage because they've arrived or have all the answers. It's about creating space to hear how God is meeting ordinary people in the middle of everyday life. Each story is different, each season is different, but every story points to the same faithful God. My hope is that as you listen today, you won't simply hear someone else's story. I hope you'll remember your own. Where has God met you? What has he been teaching you? How has he been faithful? Because every testimony ultimately reminds us of who he is. So would you welcome these three wonderful faces of Fixate with me as they vulnerably share their testimonies with us, the church body. We're going to kick it off with Ethan. Let's jump in.
What up? Hi guys, my name's Ethan. If I haven't had the privilege of meeting you yet, I would love to meet you. Yeah, a little bit about me. Fixate, we actually, my wife and I, she came day one, I came day two. Some of that has to do with a little bit of our story, but before I kind of dive into my story, man, I just feel like we haven't done this in a couple weeks just because I've been gone, but how grateful are you guys for our pastors that we have here that serve on our staff? I mean, they're getting rest in this month, and they've been gone, but it is well-deserved. If you've been texting them, stop. No, I'm just kidding. But so excited to have them back next week. But my wife and I, and especially me, we would not be here. One, without this church. We would not be here without our pastors. What they were able to do and speak and love in our lives has been absolutely incredible. So before I do what I wanted to do, I just wanted to take a moment to honor them. So I grew up in church. I was a pastor's kid. How many pastor's kids in the building? Yeah, you're the real ones. You know what's up. Yeah, we were at church Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Any day that ended in Y, we were there 24/7. And so growing up as a kid, my mom was the youth pastor, young adults pastor. We did fine arts, shout out human videos. If you've ever been in one, you know you also a real one. Nobody's done any human video. Look it up. It'll change your life. They're so much fun. And so usually when you're a PK and you start growing up, you start becoming a teenager, there kind of becomes this, with most PKs, at least a lot of my friends, they kind of start to walk away from the church. I know deconstruction has kind of been a big thing that's just happened and spread across kind of our country and the church world. And I've had a lot of friends go through that, and some of it's PKs, some of it's just kids that grew up in church. And so for me, my journey was a little bit different in the aspect that as I became a teenager, I actually felt the call to kind of jump into ministry. Had opportunities there to do that at my home church in Chino Valley, Arizona, which is where I'm from, if you know where it's at. Shout out Chino Valley. There's about 2,000 people at the time growing up, so very, 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 very small town. And had an opportunity to do an internship there. Started jumping in with ministry. I was like, I want to do youth and young adults. That's all I want to do. Started jumping in on the worship team, and I was just super excited just to kind of do whatever was in front of me at the time. Eventually had a mentor come into my life that was super huge, super impactful in my life, and did an internship with him, got my ministerial credentials, and then he was like, hey, I'm planning a church in Flagstaff. Do you want to come? And I was 17, and I was like, yes, get me out of my trailer. I absolutely want to do ministry. I want to get out of here. Like, let me do something. So we jumped in. I was dating my wife at the time. We went and planted a church in Flagstaff and helped plant that church. It's still successful today, still there. And we did that for about 8 years. And then how we got here for the first time was that my wife is a nurse, and so we jumped back into nursing school, so we came to Phoenix so that she could do that. And we played, for the very first time, the church hunting game of just like going anywhere and everywhere. And the transition for me leaving Flagstaff to come to Phoenix was probably one of the most influential moments in my life, that God kind of had to just smack me around and be like, dude, what are you doing? And a reason for that is growing up in church and when I was doing ministry, I thought it was the only thing that mattered. It was the only thing that I wanted to pursue. I thought that it was my life, and if I couldn't do it at the church that I was at in Flagstaff, then I couldn't do it anywhere else kind of situation. It kind of became this almost idol in my life to a certain extent. And I had to go through this transition of just not being a servant, that I'm first a son. And I think sometimes when you grow up in church, or even grow up in the ministry or grow up as a PK or anything like that, you can kind of get into this mindset that what you do for God is all that you are worth versus who you are with Him. And that transition was something that took me a long time to get through. And I'm so glad that we found Fixate, and I'm so glad that my wife was like, hey, we should go check out this church. Because I remember the first time we pulled it up, the website, when they were like doing their launch ad campaigns, and we looked at it, and I looked at the mission statement. It was depth, discipline, sacrifice, and I saw sustainability, and I was like, dude, is this church just into recycling or what? Like, what is this? And my wife is like, no, it's like, she read it for me. It's like sustainability of your faith. I was like, oh, that makes sense. And then she showed me a picture of Micah at the time. And if you were there then, Micah looked like he was living in a van. And I was like, dude. So anyway, it was a rough start, but I'm glad we came. She came the first Sunday. I was preaching at one of my buddies' churches in Prescott. So we both came the second Sunday. And I remember when we came the second Sunday, us together, we were like, man, this is home. And I went back into this mindset of like, man, I found somewhere where I can jump back in to serve right away, right? And I went up to Amanda, because I didn't know whose worship she was doing worship at the time. I was like, hey, I do this, that, and the other thing. Can I jump in? And in a nicer way, she pretty much just told me flat out no. And I kind of was like, dude, this is a church plant. You need help. You know what I mean? And any church that I've ever been to, if I told them, here's my talent, here's my ability, they're usually going to snag it and try to get me to serve like right away, or like, hey, jump in, we need your help kind of situation. This was the first place that I had ever come where I'd basically be given the door of just like, hey, not yet. And I had to kind of go through this transition of just like removing this idea that servanthood was the only thing that I was worth to the church and to the ministry. And so when I couldn't do it anymore, I actually had to come to this conclusion with God of just like, was I doing it for you, or was I really doing ministry for myself? And if I was doing it for Him, that means that I'm comfortable and confident in who I am and who I was called to be. But when I'm doing it for me, it means that I was really just trying to find worth in something that wasn't what it was meant to be for in the first place. And so I was worth it as a son, but I only felt worth it as a servant at the time. And so there was this transition that kind of had to happen in my life. I'm a snowboard instructor up on the mountain at Snowball during the wintertime. It's my favorite job I've ever had. When I did that job, one of the things that we always do with people when they come in for the very first time is we either get two types of people. We get one type of person that looks up at the top and is like, I'm ready to go, let's make it happen. Or we have somebody that's like, are we really going up to the top right now? You know, those kind of things. And what we do is we teach everybody in the flat ground. And we're really just teaching people how to stand up, because how many of you guys have been snowboarding before? Okay, if you've never been, come hit me up. I'd love to teach you. But when you go, there is this process that you have to go through. There's two different ways that friends teach each other. If you do it the right way, you come, you get everything taught to you on flat ground, and then we go up to the top. Or you have that really bad friend that's like, I'm going to take you to the top, and we're going to figure it out on the way down, right? Well, when you get to the top and you have to figure it out on the way down, there's this falling that happens. You have to figure it out yourself. You've been given no tools to get down to the bottom of the mountain. And by the time you get to the bottom, you're absolutely exhausted and you don't want to do it again because you're like, what just happened, right? Whereas if you start where there's flat ground, you start learning the basics, you start learning the principles, and then you can go to the top and you actually have some tools to help you get down. It's still not going to look pretty, but at least you have something. And my problem is I was constantly trying to go to the top of the mountain. I'm just ready to go, ready to go, ready to go. And then this was the very first year that I actually taught snowboarding, even though I was an expert, and I felt like I knew nothing because I had to get taught all of the basics all over again because I taught myself and all of the technique was completely wrong. So I couldn't even teach others. And it's the same thing in my faith. It's just like I was constantly in this position of trying to figure it out myself. And to be honest with you, even just being here at this church, doing things like practicing the way, understanding what is depth, what is discipline, when my life was just surrounded completely and only by sacrifice, that I didn't have the other things that I needed to instill in my life. And so my life was just complete sacrifice, and there was no surrender, there was no depth, and there was absolutely no discipline. And so when it came to that part of my life, I just had to lay it down and just be like, God, I know nothing. I've been in ministry for 10 years, but I literally know nothing. He goes, you know talent and ability, but I don't care about your ability. I just wanted you to be, I just wanted your availability to be with me, essentially, right? I just wanted you to be my son. I wanted you to be with me in these moments. And so that was a huge transition for me. And my encouragement to like most people today, if there's anything that you take away just from my story and so on and so forth, is that what you do for God, your talent and ability, if you're going to GCU, like doing the worship program, if you're getting your program to try and do ministry of any kind, like your talent and ability, man, it's not who you are. It's not your identity. God first called you to be a son. He first called you to be a daughter, and he wanted you to sit at his feet. The talents and abilities, seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. They're added to you. And so I would just encourage you today that if you're doing any of those things where you just like, I want to jump into ministry, I want to serve, I really am trying to dedicate my life to this for God mentality, I would challenge you to not do something for God, but to just have the posture, what am I doing with God today versus what am I going to do for God in the future? And don't get them flipped and don't reprioritize the other things. And so my story that I always come back to, and it's just something that if you've grown up in church, you hear it all the time. It's just the story of Martha and Mary. And that's found in Luke 10, but it says this, now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And that was my life. I was distracted with much serving, even though Jesus was in my house. And I welcomed him in. And so I would just challenge you not to be so much distracted, but to realize that your life should be a life of devotion and not one that's distracted just strictly with the servanthood of the calling of our faith. It says, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. And I can tell you that in that time, I was anxious and troubled, literally about everything. And it's because I just refused to sit at his feet. I just literally refused to listen. I refused to understand who he was so that I could learn more about who I am in him. And it really is just that simple mindset shift of just, man, it cannot be about servanthood. It has to be about sonship. I needed to be content in doing the little things with God before I was given the keys to do big things for him. And now I'm on staff here at Fixate, and it's been incredible. Just even the last couple months that I've been here. Wild story there. Micah was like, you have 2 days to let me know if you can jump on staff or not. And I was like, thanks, Micah, for that. Wonderful timing. But we're here because we said yes, and we are so excited to be here. But I don't think God would have trusted me to do any sort of ministry going forward if I was not willing to do the small things with him. And the small things, I think, are actually big in hindsight when you look at it. The small things were, where was my marriage at the time? That was always below ministry for a really long time. My wife and I, we had to go through this long journey of like, no, we got to put each other first. I need to put you first. And then my relationship with God, obviously, above that. My life was just a house of walls and no foundation. And so I would just challenge you to make sure that if you are in this process of seeing friends or even yourself deconstructing, I honestly hate that word. I think because if you just deconstruct something, then nothing is being rebuilt. And so I would challenge you to reconstruct your faith versus deconstruct it, if anything, and go through this process of what am I going to build on going forward? Am I going to build on my talents and my abilities, my identity that I really don't understand because it's in something that I do versus the person that I serve? And then I would challenge you to make sure that your foundation is built on God. And I know that's such a simple thing to think about, as like, well, just build my house on the rock. Yeah, it's that simple. It really is, right? It's harder to do because it requires that depth, and it does require that discipline. And those are the things that you have to practice over and over and over again until you get that to that point. See, the closer you get, it doesn't just confirm the beauty, it reveals the power. And I'll end on this story, and then we'll move on. But I've been blessed and privileged to be able to go on a couple international trips last year. And one of the trips that I went on with one of my best friends was we went to Japan a couple months ago. And we had a couple places that we were going to go. And the one that I was super excited for was to go to Mount Fuji. I didn't know when I got there that Mount Fuji is only visible like 70% of the time. And I was like, sick, we're going to see a mountain. And everybody, when we got there, it was super rainy. They're like, dude, you're not going to see the mountain. I was like, super depressed. It's like, all right, cool, whatever. Well, we go. Our first day that we get there, crystal clear. So we got to see the mountain for the whole day, got it for the whole night. And I'm big into film photography. And so I told my friend, I was like, hey, I want to go out and get some film photography at night and kind of try and do some astrophotography of the volcano and the mountain. And so we went out. We're jet lagged still. We went at like midnight, like 12:30. I don't think I got into bed until like 2:30, 3 o'clock that night. And I just took my film camera, crystal clear skies and the mountain. And I get out to this lake in the shore. It is the one and only time that I have ever felt like the only person on planet Earth. Like, I was the only one that was getting to witness this because my friend was sleeping in the car. I don't know why he was sleeping in the car. It's like, dude, there's a mountain. Come on. But I go out to the shore, and just for the first, 10 minutes, I'm just taking pictures because I'm just like, man, this is incredibly beautiful. And I hear this whisper, just take a couple steps forward. And I'm on the shore of the lake, and when I literally took 2 steps forward, the lake was so still that not only did I get the mountain, I also had the reflection of the mountain in the lake as well. And I'm freaking out. I go grab my camera. I'm like, man, I got to get this picture. And I did snag it, and it's actually a screensaver on my phone. I changed it this morning just as a reminder today. But I'm in this moment, and I'm like, dude, I need to just be still for 3 seconds. Because I'm freaking out, looking at this beautiful thing. And then I finally hear God start to speak to me, and my soul starts to calm. And he goes, the water is your soul. I was like, what do you mean by that? And he goes, it had to be so still that it reflected the beauty that was beyond it. And for me in my life, it was just that moment of just like, you can't reflect who God is until you're still first. And when you're still, then you can reflect the beauty. And I also couldn't see it until I took a couple steps further. And so once I took those steps, that's when I was able to see the beauty, to be still, know that he is God, and I could reflect that and not be so focused on anything else. Micah Shaw talked about it a lot last week, just like, what is the posture of your heart, honestly? And what is the posture of your heart when it comes to serving in ministry? What does it come to the posture of your heart? Is if your talent is your identity, man, just look back where your foundation is. It's not what you were called to be. Something you're called to do, that's cool. But at the end of the day, you are a son, you are a daughter, long before you are a servant. So that's my story.
Let's give it up for Ethan.
Hello, my name is Deborah. My husband and I have been attending Fixate since day one. I know you guys are all very used to seeing Jarrell up on stage very frequently, so he's a lot better than this, or better at this than me, as you see. So please bear with me. But we were at the very first Vision Night and have been here ever since. This church has been very life-changing and life-giving for our family. So happy to share this space with you guys. We have a 3-year-old daughter, Aaliyah, and a 1-year-old son, Dion. I don't really have a cool story as to how I became a Christian. My dad was a missionary kid. Both of my grandfathers were pastors. I grew up in the church. We were there every Sunday. I was told that when I was 2, I was running my Sunday school class. I don't remember any of this, and on my way here, this is probably going to age myself a little bit, I was hyping myself up, listening to Call on Jesus by Nicole C. Mullins. So as I was trying to figure out what I was going to speak on today, I felt like God put 2 stories on my mind. When I was in high school, my summer job was lifeguarding. And in order to be a lifeguard, you had to train for several weeks and then had to pass a series of tests, both written and practical. Then, once you became a lifeguard, we had training every single week to just keep those skills fresh and on top of our minds. So my second year lifeguarding, I was 16 years old. My least favorite days to work as a lifeguard were camp days. Camp days meant we opened the pool a couple hours early to allow the park district day campers to come and swim. It was always chaos because there were tons and tons of campers, not enough camp workers, and 7 lifeguards. Each lifeguard was assigned a chair, and then we would rotate chairs every 15 minutes. But you get a zone of coverage. So what that means is you basically have this radius of water that you're monitoring just back and forth for those 15 minutes. And then your zones kind of overlap a little bit to make sure that every spot of water is being monitored. I noticed a little boy outside of my zone doing the dead man's float. I hated it when kids did this because they always thought it was funny. I said, he's just playing around. Let me keep on my zone. So I scanned back again, and he was still there. I didn't like the feeling, so I jumped in. Ooh. It's been 19 years since this happened, and I didn't think I would cry. I blew my whistle, and I jumped in. It felt like it took forever to get to him. I had to go underwater to pull him up onto my tube, and I immediately realized he needed rescue breathing. I went back to reach into my bag, and my mask had fallen out. I sat there screaming for someone to come in and help as my peers just sat in their chairs frozen. A lifeguard on the opposite end of the pool realized what was going on. He jumped off his chair and ran in. We were able to do rescue breathing until we were able to get him to the edge of the water where the next set of lifeguards were able to take over his care. Thankfully, the little boy survived. My second story, I was working at GCU as an athletic trainer. If you don't know what an athletic trainer is, no, it is not a personal trainer. If you watch football, when a player gets hurt, the people who run out onto the field to evaluate the injury, that's an athletic trainer. We then see the injury, we rehab them through it, and the hope is to get them back and healthy to their sport. It's like a mix of a first responder and a physical therapist. I had just been there barely 3 months, and the men's volleyball season had just started. We were at our first day of practice after Christmas, second practice of the day. One of the athletes walked over to me saying that he wasn't feeling right, but not to worry that this had happened before. Another situation where it wasn't sitting right with me. He sat on the floor, so I sat next to him and monitored him closely. He asked for a cup of water, so I got it for him. He took a sip and then laid on the ground and started to kick his shoe off. A moment later, he went into a seizure. I looked at the coach and I said to call 911. About 30 seconds into his seizure, he woke up, heard me talking about an ambulance, and said, No, I'm okay. Don't call an ambulance. I looked at him and I said, It's okay, it's just precaution. You're all right. He then went into a second, larger seizure. That led to cardiac arrest. His heart had stopped. With the help of the team manager, I completed 3 rounds of CPR and administered a shock with the AED. He woke up after we shocked him with the AED, right as the paramedics walked in. He was able to return to his sport a year later after heart surgery and continued his collegiate career, becoming one of the top collegiate men's volleyball players in the country. Okay, God, why these 2 stories? A couple weeks go by and we had a renewal room Sunday, And if I'm being totally honest, I used to dread renewal room Sundays. God has a sense of humor today, doesn't he? I used to joke with my husband that I was going to go hide or find some excuse as to why I could get out of the sanctuary until it was over. It always made me feel uncomfortable, and I never knew why. Because anytime someone would pray over me, spoiler alert, it was exactly what I needed to hear, or exactly what I didn't know I needed to hear. As I was preparing for today, I think it finally clicked why it made me so uncomfortable. Caring for others seems to come naturally for me. Accepting that same care in return does not. That can be a testimony for another day. Micah, if you're listening, you didn't hear that. Anyway, that renewal room Sunday, a good friend of mine asked to pray over me. She told me God wanted to remind me that he is steady, and reminded me of when Jesus calmed the storm, that he was steady. But she also felt God wanted to remind me that I am his daughter, so I also have his steadiness in me. And then everything clicked. I understood the stories. I'm a year into being a stay-at-home mom, and that week, my husband had been traveling for work. I was alone with my 2 kids, the 3-year-old and the 1-year-old. I had a rough day. I felt like a failure. I felt frustrated. I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. There's no magic formula for what to do when you decide to peel your 3-year-old's banana instead of letting her do it, or having a meltdown for 20 minutes over the fridge light not turning off, or your 1-year-old fighting for every inch of his life to crawl on the floors of Target instead of sitting in the cart, or your daughter waking up, getting out of bed 8 times at night while you're trying to reset the house by yourself with every excuse in the book. When I was a lifeguard and an athletic trainer, I spent hours and hours of training, studying, practicing, earning a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, taking an exam to be board certified. I was steady. But there isn't that for motherhood. Sure, there are books you can watch your peers or model how you were or weren't raised. But it's not a textbook formula like CPR or testing a knee for an ACL tear. But God reminded me that he calmed the storm. This story is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but I'm going to be reading from Matthew chapter 8, 23 through 27. And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waters, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, O you of little faith?" Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" Jesus rebuked the winds and sea, and there was a great calm. According to Merriam-Webster, steadiness is the quality of being calm, reliable, and firmly fixed. God is steady, which means I have steadiness in me. Even though there are days where I feel like I'm failing at motherhood, my daughter loves to read her Bible and talk about Jesus. One day she was reading her Bible on the kitchen floor, and I asked her what she was doing, and she said she was reading it over her friend who was sick. She will also randomly sing "Go Cubs Go" or request for me to play it in the car, so I know I'm not a complete failure. But in all seriousness, this just doesn't pertain to motherhood. No matter what season of life you're in, starting college, a career change, a relationship change, newly married, recently divorced, a new parent, seasoned parent, loss, whatever it may be, take the time to listen to God's voice and remember that God is steady. God will calm the storm.
Good.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sean. But before I start, a round of applause for Ethan and Deborah. Those amazing testimonies. I am humbled and honored to share this stage with these amazing individuals who have been just an absolute pillar in my life since coming here to Fixate. But yes, my name is Sean. I'm the unofficial unk of Fixate. I've been here since day one, when Micah slid into my DMs unprovoked. and asked if I'd be interested in learning a little bit more about a church plant he was doing here in downtown Phoenix. And I think you and Jarrell beat us by one vision night. So my wife and I met with Micah, met with Grace, and kind of saw and heard the vision of what Fixate was going to be, right? A heart for community, a heart for the transient, trying to bring this level of love and dependence on the Lord here to downtown Phoenix, and we were immediately sold. But my testimony is far from someone who would ever want to be a part of a church plant, let alone church in general. I grew up in a suburb of Northern California over in the East Bay. And from the outside looking in, it looked like I had a pretty idyllic childhood. I had a father, a mother, a sibling. We had a prototypical American family, right? But on the inside of the doors, it was chaos. My father was a hard man. He battled demons and identity issues throughout his life, and he just didn't know how to love. And that created in him this level of rage and abusiveness toward my mother and toward me and my brother that I can remember as early on as 3 years old being beaten by my father because I left a toy out in the middle of the living room. So when I hear stories of, like Micah Shaw's amazing word last week about idolizing their father, I couldn't relate to stories like that because I loathed my dad. And in that environment of constantly feeling like you're walking on eggshells and having a mother who was in the church, she was a leader in the church and reverted to the father, the husband being the head of the household. So put up with a lot of things that my dad was throwing at her under the guise of being a submissive wife. I had this jaded feeling of not only religion in general, but also what it meant to be a father, to be a husband, to be a man. And it created in me two distinct issues as a child. One, I had this level of need for acceptance and performative acceptance. So the better I was in contrast to anybody else, or the better I was just as on my own merit, I felt that's what garnered my father's love. And secondly, it created in me this crippling feeling of weakness and helplessness. So when you have those two issues that you've inherited now as a child and you're maturing and growing into, a teenager, what that created in me was an absolute monster out on the streets. I sought validation by being the toughest kid on the block. I sought strength in being able to beat up people, hurting people. This desire to be respected turned into me being, I don't want to say a bully, because I used a justification in my actions, right? Like, I was slighted, or it was a perceived slight. So this person needs to catch this fade, right? And I'm not saying it was right, and I'm not saying I won every fight either. I wasn't like, Mike Tyson in the prime, but I was down to scrap with anybody at any time. Because I thought if people respected or feared me, then I don't have to have this feeling of being helpless or weak. And that carried over so far into my preteen and teenage years, it exasperated because now I found girls, right? Now I found, if I have drip, if I have a little bit of money in my pocket, I got girls. Girls equate to status, right? So it became this different kind of consumption for validation by how many girls do I have? How fly am I looking? How much money do I have in my pocket, right? So that created this desire to accumulate these kind of toxic material traits, selling drugs, robbing, sticking up. Like I was doing the worst things imaginable, all to justify my self-worth to nobody else but me, right? But in my mind, I'm like, these people don't respect me unless I got these gold chains, unless I got these girls on my arm, unless they know that I will throw hands at the drop of a dime. And it in that society and growing up in a pretty gang-heavy neighborhood, that was actually revered. Like I did get validation. I did have friends as a result of these actions, right? But it wasn't sustainable because I never felt whole. So I do the good things, right? I go to college, right? I beat the statistics, man. I go to school, I get out of college, I get started a career in finance, but this inherent desire for validation and strength still persisted in my soul. So that equated now to me being a corporate gangster. I was stepping over the body of the person in the position in front of me to get that title. More titles, more money, better khakis, more flex. All of these things were driving me to be the best, right? And not for any reason other than I just wanted that validation and that. And I would justify, oh, I need to make more money because I need to support my family. I need to make more money to set myself for the future. Oh, there's nothing wrong in working hard. There's nothing wrong in being a workaholic. There's nothing wrong in me exploiting this individual's mistake for my own personal gain. But there was no love or compassion or any kind of emotion other than selfishness behind all of my actions. Whether I was in work, in relationships that I had that failed, even in me being a father, I was absent for a lot of my kids', cornerstone moments because I was working or I was chasing selfish endeavors. And I just thought this was how it was going to be. No matter how much success I received, no matter how, whether it was athletic or at, in the job, no matter how good I got, no matter how many accolades I received, I would feel hollow every night. I would feel alone in a room full of people, no matter how many people were singing my praises because I was trying to garner their attention and their affection. I was always alone. And I just thought this was just normal. Like, I didn't know. Like, I said, well, I need to accumulate more. I need to do more. I need to be more to get this hole to be filled. So flash forward, hundreds of failed relationships. I am dating this girl who ends up being my beautiful wife, Amy. Yeah, shout out to this hottie right there. And it was one night, we weren't saved. Amy grew up in kind of in a church and has a similar kind of testimony, but one night, for whatever reason, we were out partying. It was like 3 in the morning. We came back to her apartment. We were just wasted, like completely obliterated. And she just starts talking about spirituality and the Lord. And I am like, I don't want to hear any of this. I am trying to go to sleep. Just shut up. I'll go to church, right? You find me at church, and I gave her this long list of like I didn't even know what these words meant. Non-denominational, multi-ethnic. I'm just throwing these buzzwords that I kind of heard in passing from my Christian friends, right? And it was like Saturday night. It was like 3 in the morning. I'm like, surely she's not going to remember this because she's just as wasted as I am. Maybe more. I don't know. So Sunday happens. Sunday comes. Nothing happens. That Monday, I'm at work, and I get a text from her. And she's like, oh, I found a church. And I was like, what do you mean you found a church? She's like, no, I found a church. Remember what you said on Saturday night? We're going to go look at a church. I was like, I was thinking to myself, I don't even remember half the conversation, but okay, cool. And in that moment of just like, yeah, like, fine, I'll go. She found a church that was nearby to her apartment. She said we should go to this Bible study. And there was a Bible study on a Wednesday night. And I remember walking in there, and I experienced all these like different like races and age groups of people, and they were all so nice. I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like, you don't know me from anybody, but you're like, oh, you're treating me like I'm a day one. And the Bible study was pretty entertaining. The leader of the Bible study sounded like the comedian George Lopez. So if you've never heard 2 Corinthians spoken in George Lopez voice, it kind of changes your perception on the Bible. And I ended up thinking, okay, this is pretty entertaining. This is pretty interesting. It was actually the armor of God, but like the George Lopez show. And I ended up agreeing with Amy to try out the church service that Sunday. So we walk into the church. We're in the back like you do when you come into a new environment. You don't want anybody to know you and see you. And so we're in the back of the church. And they're doing worship. And, again, like I was a kid in church, but I wasn't like, I just did it because my mom made me. My dad was not religious at all. He was a borderline atheist. He rallied against it, and the only time I didn't get to go to church is if he like pulled me out to like go see a movie with him because he was bored. But I don't retain anything because I was just there because I had to be. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like it. I thought it was boring. And we went to Assemblies of God, so it was kind of like speaking in tongues was weird to me at the time. But we go to this church. Again, now I'm in my early 30s, late 20s. I don't remember. It's been about 11, 12 years ago. And they're doing worship. I'm sitting in the back, hands in the pocket, just kind of vibing out, like, whatever, this is cool. And I hear an audible voice that says, "You are enough, and I love you." And I knew immediately that it was the voice of God. And the reason I knew it was the voice of God, again, no context in growing up in a church and understanding any of this that God speaks to us, was that every cell in my body on a molecular level responded to that voice. There was nothing in my entire being that could ever doubt who was speaking these words to me. And I now know, reading the Bible, my sheep know my voice. I knew that voice, even though I had no relationship with the person speaking. And I'm wrecked. I'm this, I'm a big dude. I try to put on whatever. I'm crying and weeping in front of these strangers in the back of this church. I had that second time walking into this church, just broken, just crying, because for the first time in my life, I felt love that was unconditional. And I didn't even know what that meant. And so I'm thankful that at the time, I guess some of the men at the church saw me having this thunderbolt moment in the back of the church. And so after the service, they kind of surrounded me and kind of really helped usher and mentor me into this newfound revelation. Because now I'm thinking, if the Lord is real, then everything in the Bible that I just knew the stories from being in Sunday school is real. And if those are real, then hell is real, and I don't want to go to hell. And so I immediately tried to start changing my life, and it really did. I stopped cursing, I stopped, listening to secular music. There was a lot obviously there's a lot of deep down trauma that wasn't immediately eradicated, but I now knew that there was a God in heaven who loved me, who created the universe, the stars and the moon, and me, and he loves me. And from that moment on, I knew that the true mark of my strength is at the end of my surrender. And I think that's what was so hard for me to comprehend before Christ. Was I thought I had to get out the mud myself, because no one's going to fix Sean, no one's going to fix me or my situation better than me. But then I found out that if I just lean back and put my trust in the Lord and lean on his strength, there is so much further that I could ever imagine going beyond my scope. And it's still difficult, I will be honest. To this day, I love the Lord, but as I told you guys, I had a very bad experience with a father as a child. And so when we look at the Lord in the context of a father, my first reaction was immediately to recoil in oh my God, don't hit me, right? Don't smite me, Lord, because I came out of alignment. And it's taken this journey that I've been on over the last 12 years to really embrace that the love that the Lord brings is unconditional. It is not the same as an abusive father. My God will not abuse me or neglect me or forsake me, because he loves me. And I think in that is where I started to let go of the things that I held in for control. And in that, there was a revelation that I need to lean on the Lord, even in my toughest times. Because I'll tell you, after I got saved, it wasn't like it was this cakewalk. Yeah, this moment was amazing. Oh, this was beautiful. I found the Lord. Yeah. I lost my job a week later. And I was out of work for a better part of a year. And I know, looking back now, that I needed to go through that, because if not, I would have just reverted to my old basic instincts of oh, work is tough, let me work harder. Oh, money is tight, let me work harder. Maybe I have this more religious context to it, but I'm still at my core leaning on my strength over the Lord's. And being stripped of all of that and financial security forced me, in my downtime while looking for jobs, to press in on what this thing called Christianity looks like. And in that, our bills were met. We didn't, things were tight, but no bill went unpaid. And looking back at that, I'm okay, Lord, I see you, I'm sorry. And now walking through that with that reliance to help me in days when I have the anxiety of I need to control. On days when I feel like it is up to me to save this situation, I can look back at my testimony and see how far the Lord has come and brought me through by promising that no matter what, even if life is difficult, the ease isn't in me. The ease is in the fact that the Lord is with me and helping me on those moments where I'm too weak to carry on myself. And I am thankful for that. And I'm thankful for a church that embodies this situation and this perception, so that as a community, we build each other up, so that we can see that the Lord works not just through his own miraculous power, but through the community that we here have at this church. And it's reminded me of this particular scripture that I want to share with you guys in 2 Corinthians 12:9, where Paul writes, "And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly I will rather boast of my infirmities, and the power of Christ may rest upon me." And I think for me, having to have so many of those thorns in my side, like Paul was battling, of my self-worth being based on my own power, to be able to turn that over and see that Christ, who was one of the most powerful entity to ever to walk this earth, who could have just immediately gotten out of any situation that he got in with the power of the Lord, chose to give his life for us in the most humble, humiliating, painful, degrading fashion. And if that, to me, is the truest, most poignant mark of strength, then I need to make sure that I am dying to myself daily to replicate that each and every day. And before I go, I do want to say that there is a power in that redemption and surrender, because though my dad may have been atheist for most of his life, on his deathbed, my wife and I were able to fly out to Cali to see him and pay our last respects. And I know, in praying over my father for hours, that my dad encountered the Lord on his last few moments on earth and was radically saved before passing on and going to heaven. So I thank the Lord for that. That was an answered prayer, because what is heaven if my parents aren't there? And I am grateful for that, and I am grateful for everyone here at Fixate as well.
Let's give it up one more time for all three of them, Ethan, Deborah, and Sean. I know for me, the natural response to remembering God's faithfulness has always been worship, and so I want to invite the worship team up in just a moment. But my prayer is that you won't leave today simply remembering what God has done in their lives. I pray that you'll remember what he's doing in yours. Maybe today you were reminded of a prayer he answered. Maybe it brought to mind a season that he carried you through. Or maybe, like me, you're in a season where you're still waiting. And today was a reminder that the same God who has been faithful before is still faithful today. The beautiful thing about testimony is it just points us back to Jesus. And the natural response, as I said, is to engage in worship. And so would you stand with me to your feet as we end in the Lord's Prayer?